Hello, this is Sir Green Thumb and welcome to my advanced lighting mod tutorial. In this tutorial my aim is to show everybody what I've been doing, as well as to hopefully teach you a little bit so that you can go in and make your own tweaks and adjustments to the mods, or just go ahead and make your own mod. The first thing I'd like to talk about is I'd like to go back over the HDR settings that I went over before in the last tutorial, which I didn't really elaborate too much on this stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and show you this here. The eye adapt speed is how quickly your eyes are going to change from the received bloom threshold to the white. Now in the game it calls these two numbers Target Luminence, and you could think of this as like your received bloom threshold would be like pupils fully dilated, and white would be pupils fully contracted. So the eye adapt speed is how fast it's going to try to change from these two numbers as you look at bright things or dark things. Now down here you have eye adapt strength, and what this is it sets the sensitivity of it. So if you set this number higher, it takes more light to try to encourage a change between these two numbers. So if you set this really high, it'll settle in somewhere in between these two numbers and just kind of stay there, and it won't really change very much. If you set it really low, the pupil effect will fluctuate so quickly it looks weird. But in some situations I guess you might do that, but I've never set it lower than 12. The bloom blur radius is an interesting number. I'm not really sure exactly how to define it. You can get similar results by adjusting brightness and contrast down here, though I've never seen this done anywhere in the game. All those settings are all one on every image space that I could find, and it doesn't seem to be, not only is it more difficult, but it doesn't seem to look quite as good. So I use the bloom blur radius to do that, and basically if you lower this, things start to get really white, how should I explain it, less contrasted, we'll just say that. And then as you raise it, things get to be really super contrasted, which is really good for a nighttime look. And that's one of the reasons why my mod looks really good at night, I think, is because I'm using this bloom blur radius. I've set it all the way to 0.31, which seems to be the furthest you would want to go. I mean, if you go any further than that, it just starts making everything look really black. But so here we have bloom threshold, which is how bright lights need to be to cause bloom. So if you raise this really high, it's kind of like turning bloom off, but you still might see it on really super bright things. The bloom scale is how powerful the bloom is. So once bloom is created, this is how much you'll see it. So if you take this to 0, it basically shuts bloom off. So here are your target luminances. And then sunlight scale. This actually will change both the moonlight and the sunlight. So once the sun goes down, it's basically the same thing. It seems to be the same, except a few little differences I've noticed. For some reason, moonlight will not reflect off of water. I don't know why that is. I'm still trying to figure out how to get it to do that, because I think that would look really cool. But it doesn't, and it's kind of irritating, but I have no idea why that is. Sky scale, this is going to adjust the entire sky. Now there's better ways to adjust the sky. You can go in and you can adjust upper sky, lower sky, and horizons and the weather patterns. I'll get to that later. But if you want to just do a rough adjustment, you can do the sky scale. Now what's great about using this HDR to adjust it is you can do it in the game. You can go in the game and use the PHP and SHP and really fine tune it on the fly and get it to look just how you want it, quick and easy. So that's one of the best things about using the image spaces to achieve your desired results. But if you only use the image spaces, you're going to be cutting yourself short, because there's a lot of stuff that can't be done in here, and there's some things that only can be done in here. So you really kind of have to use a combination of everything if you want to get the best desired results. So I'll get to some of the other things that we can do in just a minute. One other thing that I'd like to get touch on is a method called the SGTM. It stands for Set Global Time, and here I'll show that to you in the game. In my previous tutorial I showed some neat techniques like passing time and forcing weathers to adjust your image spaces, but I forgot to mention the SGTM, and what that's good for is adjusting your transitions. So say you want to do dusk, what you're going to want to do is pass time all the way until right before dusk time. So here we're at 4:30, and then what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and force the clear weather to make sure we're looking at the clear sky. And now when we want to adjust dusk, what you do is SGTM. I usually do maybe 15 or 20, but in this case I'm going to show you 50. You have to do it in increments of 1, which setting number 1 is the default setting, but I'm going to do 50, and what it does is it speeds time up really fast, and you can just watch your transition go by. Now when you're watching it in high speed like this, it's really helpful because it's easy to pick out any abnormalities, and you can watch your sky and your horizon and lower sky and make sure that everything looks correct as it transitions in from day to night. And then you can do the same, of course, with the dawn, and that's a really good strategy for transitions. Another thing that I'd like to mention when you're working with these image spaces is to make sure that you keep consistency, especially with the received bloom threshold or target luminance low number, because basically as the game goes through these different time frames and weather patterns, well, not so much the time frames, but like say you're in one time frame, like at night especially, like if you're standing near a fire at night and all of a sudden the game switches to a new weather pattern, if your other weather pattern has a different target luminance, it'll look kind of weird, because like if you're standing near like a lantern or something like that, because this target luminance affects everything, it'll make everything brighter. So as soon as it switches to a new weather, it might make the light next to you brighter, and it just might like look kind of weird. So it's good to try to keep this consistent through all your different weather patterns. That's the main thing. Just wanted to touch base on that a little bit. The next topic is the weathers, and there's a whole lot you can do in these weather patterns. The first thing here are the cloud layers. There's 28 possible layers, but only 12 of them are taken. Layer 0 has ability to show lightning in it when the lightning flashes. I don't know if you noticed, but whenever the lightning flashes on the vanilla game, it doesn't show any kind of flashing in the clouds or the sky, which is weird. It only shows it all over the ground. But the game actually does have the ability to do it, and it's in layer 12. But you have to turn it on, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later here. Layer 1, 2, and 3 are kind of like they don't move around a lot, and they're good for maybe an overcast night. 4 and 5, 6 and 7 are all like really thick clouds. They have their own little bit of movement to them, very slight, but you can't really add movement to these clouds without making them look weird. They're the thick ones for the storms that cover the whole sky. Usually you only see 4 and 5, but 6 and 7 they're so similar you can't really tell the difference between them. Layer 8 and 9 are clouds for the horizon, and they can look pretty radical, but they don't really move around at all. Layer 10 and 11 are directly overhead, and they do take movement. They're the only layers that I've noticed that can actually take movement. If you add movement into them, you can make it look almost like there's a tornado swirling around in the sky. You just can't do that with any of the other layers. If you try to do it, it makes it look blocky, and just strange things happen. Layer 12 is an important layer, and I wouldn't even view it as a cloud layer, really. The layer 12 is more like a horizon. It sits right in between, or more or less it overlaps the horizon and the actual land, where the land meets the sky, so that you can use layer 12, especially when you're doing your transitions. You can use layer 12 to kind of mask the horizon edge and kind of blend it in a lot easier. Now here you have where you can put in your speeds and stuff, so you can pick which cloud layer you want to add speeds to. If you put a positive number, it'll go one direction. If you put a negative number, it goes the other direction. I don't think you can go higher than 1. It doesn't seem like you can. So you have you basically have Y speed and then X speed. So if you put Y and X speed on one layer, it'll look like it's swirling around kind of. Now what this next part is, this is where you adjust each cloud layer's color. So you got layer 1 through 28 or 30, I mean, and you can just go through and change all the different colors to the different clouds and stuff. So you can see, there's a lot of those, but most of these aren't used. Only the 1 through 12. So here are the alphas for the cloud layers. If you set this any of these numbers to 1, the clouds will look as thick as they would normally look, as if they were to be as thick as they could look. If you put it higher than 1, they start to look like black holes in the sky. It's just not, it's not good. And if you lower below, as you go below 1, they start to become very transparent. And if you make it 0, it's pretty much the same as disabling the cloud. But these are the different time frames of the day, so you can have your cloud alphas do different things for the time frames in the day. And anytime you see unknowns, like the game, FO4edit always does this. Like, it doesn't know how to label these, but basically it's it goes sunrise day, sunset night, and then you have dawn E, dawn L, dusk E, dusk L. It always follows that same pattern anytime you see that. So once you get through the cloud alphas, then you can start adjusting parts of the sky. Here you have upper sky, then you have fog near. Fog near, you're not going to notice any changes on these numbers if you're too high in altitude. You have to be down in the thick of the fog to really notice any difference when you're changing these numbers. But it is exactly what it says it is. It adjusts what the fog looks like that's close by to you. There's a lot of unknowns, and some of these really just don't do anything. Ambient, to be quite honest, I can't tell any difference at all changing these numbers. So I know the game uses directional ambience. I'll get to that in a minute. So if you want to change ambience, you want to use directional ambient. I don't really even know what this is. I've tried changing it one extreme to the next, and I haven't been able to see any difference. Sunlight is just like you do in the image space, how you have the sunlight for when I said it was the moon and the sky. It's the same in here too. So this is the same, really the same number, but it's a little bit different because sunlight will affect more things than just the sunlight. Like it'll affect kind of how things look reflecting off glass and things like that. So actually though, it really doesn't matter whether you change these numbers here or in the image space. But the difference between doing it here is you can actually manipulate which color it is. And the sun here, this is actually the color of the sun in the sky instead of the light that it's giving off. And the stars, that's the color of the stars in the sky. Anytime you're trying to change a number, you always want to do it by a factor. So like if you want to change all these by the same amount, you want to say, I'll double this, I'll times 18 by 2. Then you want to make sure you times all the others by 2. That way you'll keep the same color, and all you really do is raise the brightness or lower the brightness if that's what you're trying to do. So here you have sky lower, pretty much self-explanatory. Horizon is right below sky lower. It's in between sky lower and the actual land, and like I said, cloud layer 12 then can help even further with that. Effect lighting will affect your rain. It affects how things reflect off of glass and signs and things like that. So if you have a really dark night and you have this turned up too high, it might look weird on certain situations. So you got to make sure you calibrate all this stuff together. FO4 is weird. I don't know why they name it FO4. It doesn't look like, to me, it is not fog at all. This seems like it should be labeled something more like distant watercolor or something like that, because when you change these numbers, the only thing it changes is what the color of the water is on near the horizon. And it's actually very helpful too. So when the sun comes up near a lake or a body of water, you do want to make it look like the sun is reflecting off the water. So by changing these numbers to make it look more orange, you can give it a neat effect for the horizon and things. Sky statics will affect a lot of stuff. It'll affect how bright lightning is, clouds, and all sorts of things in the sky. The water multiplier. Now, water multiplier has some glow. You can. I set it to 0 if it's a really, really dark night, because otherwise it just looks weird. Like, why is the water glowing for no reason? But when you do have some moonlight or some light, you do want to set your watercolor. It's just another one of those things that you have to calibrate according to how dark or bright your night is. So otherwise this will look weird. So just need to make sure that's set correctly. Sun glare, I honestly haven't noticed anything what it does. I'm sure it does something, and I've checked and I can't figure it out. It just doesn't seem to do anything. But maybe later on I'll figure that out. I usually don't tamper with these numbers too much unless it's a really dark night and I know it's safe to just put them all at 0. Moon glare, now that I have figured it out. The moon glare, remember how I said sunlight and moonlight are the same thing? Well, moon glare is actually how the color of the moon. So they have sun glare, which I don't know, but they also have sun. Sun changes the color of the sun. But then you have moon glare to change the color of the moon. I have no idea what sun glare does. So you have the last two things on this part are going to be unknown 1 and then unknown 2. Now what these are is fog upper and fog lower. Now if you're standing up really high in altitude, you're not going to notice a whole lot of difference between these two settings. They look almost the same. The fog upper will adjust a little bit of lower fog, as well as the fog lower will adjust a little bit of the upper fog. So they're kind of both the same thing, really. But when you're standing down in the fog itself, you want to fine tune these. Usually, if you change one, you will want to change the other just a little bit. This section here is weird. It's all unknowns. It took me a while to figure out what exactly it does, and it's, to be honest, not really that helpful. And I just wouldn't even recommend it at all. I put these at 0s for really dark nights because it does help it look a little bit darker. Basically, the best I can do is I would say that this is like a fog alpha. These different unknowns are actual time frames of the day. So I've changed it for night and also these two unknowns because that's Dusk L and Dawn E, because I lengthen my night. My Dusk L and Dawn E are basically an extension of my night. So I just wanted to make the night darker, and I did that. If you change it below 0, it starts to look really weird. And if you raise it, really it just looks kind of like you're adjusting the fog. And here's where you can really do a lot of tweaking for the fog too. You've got your day near and your night near. That will adjust how clear things look directly around you. So you're not going to see any fog until 800 feet or however it is away. 800 is kind of far, actually. And then you have your night far and your day far. By lowering these, you make it thicker. I guess it's trying to simulate how far you can see or whatever. Then you have night power, day power, night max, and day max. These also just have the lower you make the power, actually, the thicker it gets for some reason. I'm not sure why. But you can tweak these around. Fog is very difficult to get right. It really is. There's a lot of stuff to take in consideration, and I'm going to touch base on that a little bit more next. A lot of these things that you can change. I'm not sure what trans delta is, or sun damage. I'm imagining, I don't know, sunburn. I guess you can't really get that, but you can change lightning frequencies and fading in and out here. If you put lightning frequency to 0, it crashes the game, so you have to have at least 1 there. It's kind of weird. This thing here, this is really interesting, the flags. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. What I like to do is, if you can change a setting, you can do right click and hit edit, but if you do like a slow double click, So you click and then click again, and it'll open up all the options for it, which is really cool, because then you can figure out what all's in there, so this is very helpful for a lot of different stats, because you're not really sure what can be put in there. So if you do the slow double click, a lot of times it shows you what all can go in there. This is one really important thing, the sky static's always visible. If you check that, that's what will allow lightning to show during the daytime. It'll allow lightning to show in the sky. I have this checked for all the rains, and I'm not really sure why it wasn't defaulted on, but it's so much better on for rainy weather. Now here is where you can disable the cloud layers, and what I was showing you about before, the 31 different cloud layers. So by default, a lot of them are already disabled. So this particular weather rain here is only using 0, 2, 4, 5, and 12, which is basically the horizon. So you got 0 to cause the flashing clouds in the sky for the lightning, 2 for some extra static clouds, and 4 or 5, which is the main clouds. And so that's really it. I've gone through all the different clouds and tried to figure out which ones look right for the different scenarios, and so I pretty much got it, I think, to where I think it's the best. Here you can put in the sounds and things. Here's all the different sky statics. Some of these are clouds, like for instance the clouds that float along near the ground. That's one of these. I haven't really messed too much with it, to be honest. I just mainly just changed the sky statics number. Here are the image spaces, the God rays. And now here's an interesting section here, the directional lighting colors. This is actually the ambience, okay? And at first glance you're thinking, well, that's all the different time frames of the day, da 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 da. No, that's not it at all. This whole part right here is all for the sunrise. So you gotta watch how the tree is formed so that you can get that, because it's coming down here, ambient colors. See, the first one is sunrise. So here's sunrise. These are all for sunrise. And basically these are your directional ambience. So you have X negative and positive, Y negative and positive, and Z negative and positive. So your X and Y are kind of like north and south. How this light, ambient light that shines in those directions. And your Z's is up and down. So your Z negative, this is the amount of light that's shining straight down. And your Z positive is the amount of light that's shining straight up. Now, the way I think of it, if there's nothing in the world to cause any kind of ambient light, these should generally be the same values except for the Z negative, in my opinion, because a lot of the ambient light's going to be coming from the sky, so straight down. So usually you want Z negative to be a little bit higher. If you're, by default, the game makes these all a little bit different, which I'm not sure why they do. But when you're dealing with a really dark night, little differences in these numbers make a huge difference in the levels of light that you're looking at. So if you're standing in a dark room at night and these are different, you're going to wonder why one wall is brighter than the next, and things like that. So it just doesn't look right. So I made these all the same except for my Z negative. And then you have them all for the different time frames of the day. So here's day, sunset, night, and you can see I've changed all of those. And then of course the 4 unknowns, which I told you about, which is Dawny, Dawnel, Dusky, and Duskell. Now after I've explained what you can do with these weathers, here's the neat thing that I've learned. If you hold down control, first you have to wave your mouse over the weather that you want to look at, and you hold down hit Control W, and it opens up the weather editor, which is really kind of cool. But to be honest, it just isn't as helpful as you would think. I mean, at first glance you're thinking, oh wow, I hit the jackpot. No, it's neat. You could look at the different time frames of the day and it gives you these different colors, but it's really, really hard to tell what these colors are actually going to look like in the game. So you're going to wind up having to start the game up every time and that's the thing that makes the image space so great. You can go in the game and just calibrate it real fast, but when you're trying to do the weathers, it's tough because you got to make a change, then load the game up, go look at it, Is that what I wanted? No. Okay, so, and you'd think that here the weather colors, this weather editor here, you'd be able to make that easier, but it's just not so. I mean, you've got all these different colors so here, fog near, sky upper, and you can see what your settings do here, but like I said, you're not going to know what it's really going to look like until you get in the game. This is all just for show, really. It's like you got your directional ambient colors here, and you're thinking, oh, I can really see what it's going to look like. No, it really doesn't show you. I mean, you can see here, like I said, my night, I made my my dawn E and my dusk L kind of an extension to the night, so you can see how they're all the same color. That's really all it's good for. And everywhere else it almost looks kind of like a rainbow, like Bethesda just painted a rainbow there and said, oh, that's cool. You know, we don't care what it's going to look like in the game, but that'll be cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, these are all the different directional ambients, and they're, in my opinion, should be relatively the same unless there's something in the environment to cause some type of directional ambient. So you can do neat things here, copy cloud layers over, and you can look at the different clouds, and this is what's kind of neat. It shows you a little bit of a picture of the cloud when you look at the different cloud layers, but that's still not at all what it looks like in the game. So it's just really, it's tough to use this. This seems to be more for show than anything else. Not to mention when you're actually in the weather and you're looking at the weathers, if you have more than one file open, you can compare all your numbers side by side, and also you can, like say if you had something changed, and you know it's easier. It's I'll just swing that number over there, and you know you can adjust your changes and figure out what you're doing a lot easier. I'm so used to scrolling up and down and because I know where everything's at. It's like really that weather editor doesn't help me very much, to be honest. When lowering directional ambience, you'll also make it much harder for certain creatures to see you. So to compensate for that, you've got two values here. The first one is how well you're hidden when you're in sneak mode. So the higher you make this number, the more you're hidden when you're in sneak mode. And this value here, the higher you make this number, the easier it is for monsters to see you all around. Now when dealing with fog, I wanted to show you one thing. If you raise the fog too high, this is what can happen. Now what I've done is I've raised the fog upper too high, and you can see that it makes everything look white. It doesn't really look like fog at all. But there's one thing that you can do to help fix this. Well, you could either lower the fog until it looks better, but really what you want to do is change the sky behind it. So you can actually change the sky color. So if I change it up, as long as the sky is a little bit brighter than all of those objects, then it'll look more like fog. They're getting a little bit closer. Just keep raising it up. So let me try 3. There. So as long as the sky behind all that stuff is brighter, you can fix that, and it actually does look a little bit more like fog then. So that's how to fix that. In this section, I'm going to talk about the interior environments. So if you go and you look in Cell, this is where all of the interior environments are, and all these blocks and sub-blocks. I'm going to show you with the pre-war Vault 111. It's broken up into 2 categories here, but actually if you just click on pre-war, you get this over here, and what we have here is ambient color. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference when you change this. It does change the overall lighting a little bit, but not much. This directional down color, I call it directional down because it's kind of like the Z negative for the directional ambient. It just basically, it's different. It's kind of like an effect lighting, I guess. It's hard to really describe or define it. it is a directional down color, and it makes textures stand out a lot. It's kind of a bluish color. It is needed. It's nice. It makes the floor brighter. It is nice to have a little bit of this. You gotta use it a little bit, but it's not quite the same as the actual directional ambience. So then you have your fog near color and your fog values that you can use, and you can make the fog move around and stuff. So, and here are the directional ambience for this interior area as well. So this is really handy to be able to calibrate right here. Your fog far and all the different values for the fog, light fade in and fade end. Now here's an important thing, inherits. This will inherit all these values under it. So fog, far, near, directional, rotation, all this stuff. It inherits it from the lighting template that is linked in. So here it is. Yeah, Vault, LT Vault Cryo. So all of this stuff that's listed up into here, it's not actually going to use, like fog near, all these values it's actually going to get from the Vault Cryo template. So, and that's because right here under inherits, it's telling it to do that. It also shows you which image space that it's using. So, now as you're calibrating the interior environment, you'll notice that when you go through different areas of the same place, that the light will tend to shift and change sometimes, and that's because they place these markers. Now you're thinking because of Vault LT, Cryo LT lighting template, this is what it would actually use, but it's not. It will only pull these inherits from this template, and that's all it's good for. But if you actually go into the tree over here for the place that you're editing, and you go into the persistent tree here, and you scroll down until you find all of the room markers. What you do is you look at these room markers, and they'll say has lighting template. Like, here's the actual other lighting templates that it uses. Now when you walk into that room and it triggers this room marker, it will load everything from this lighting template, like all the directional ambience and everything. So when you're trying to figure out how to calibrate a certain area, you actually have to go through and click on all the room markers and make a list of all the different lighting templates that are in. So here's another one, a cryo less foggy. So from experience, I know that this place only has 2 different lighting templates. So if you want to check out one of the lighting templates, then basically, let's see, LT dark. If you hold down Control and highlight it, it underlines, and you can click on it and just jump straight to it. It's under the lighting template sections. So then here you can go in, and it has basically the same thing as the other environment. All these values that it can change, and a set of directional ambient colors as well. Well, it has this here, ambient colors, and they're always set to 0, so I'm assuming they're not really used, because down here is where it actually has the directional ambience. So when you step into that room and trigger the lighting template, it just loads all of these values instead. So to calibrate the entire area successfully, you have to find all the lighting templates and calibrate them as well. Now going back to the Vault 111 here, you have the persistent folder, which has all these objects that are in that area, and these objects aren't meant to be manipulated in any way. I'm assuming they're kind of permanent environment objects. But then under the temporary folder, you have all these placeable things. So I guess once you're able to scrap and things like that, then you can, a lot of these things are scrappable in this folder. But the one thing that I wanted to show you under temporary here is you can scroll down and keep scrolling through and find anything that ends with the LIGH, and these are all the lights. So you can, I usually will make a list of, like if I'm trying to do an area and I want to fix the lights as well, I'll make a list, like I'll record that on a notepad, and I'll figure out what all the different lights are. It's usually about 15 or so different ones in the room, and then that way I have it on the list. And in a minute I'm going to show you more about how to find the lights and calibrate them as well. But I just wanted to show you about these 2 folders, because this is where all the items are, pretty much everything. And so like Some of these records, though, it's weird because I don't know why, but some of them, when you add them into your plugin, it glitches certain things in the game, and I'm not really sure. Like mainly lighting, just visual aspects of the game that I've noticed so far. I'm not really sure. I hardly ever run into it, but you don't even have to change any of the stats or anything. Just simply adding it in can glitch it. So you just have to be careful. But it's really rare, but it does happen sometimes. So say there's a particular light that you would really like to adjust, and it's really tough to find, it's got all that stuff you got to go sifting through. So the best thing to do is you pull open the game console. This gives you your cursor, and then basically anything that you click on in the world gives you a number that you can use. So let's see, I'll click there. Okay, sometimes you got to keep clicking around and make sure you get, because sometimes there's different numbers. Then you record that number 1CC0806 and say, I'll put it on a notepad. There. And then basically you can take that and just copy and paste it right in the form ID. Let me see here. Actually, there should have been a 0 in front of that. Yeah, I thought so. Let's put a 0 in front of that. It's weird because sometimes if you don't enter things in exactly, this thing will lock up on you, and it's really not pleasant when it does that. And it just shoots you right to the record, which is neat. This actually happened to be one that I created, but it'll shoot you right into the temporary folder of wherever it is that you were looking for, and then you can go ahead and edit that light. Now, actual lights, though, the LIGH, what I was talking about, this is a fixture, but you can't actually get an item number doing that on the light spot or the light that it's giving off. But you can usually click and get something close by, and then what you do is you just get the coordinates on that object, and then you find all the different lights that are in there. You make the list like I told you, and then you can usually narrow it down pretty fast and get the coordinates on a light nearby and be like, okay, it must be that one, and then you can adjust the actual light that it's giving off. So you can go under Cell, and you can find your interior area that you're wanting to adjust, and go into the temporary folder there and figure out where all your lights are and fixtures and things like that. But if you're outside and you want to find a light there, like say Red Rocket or something like that, you actually have to go down to World Space, and then you have a few 5 different world spaces. So you can go in here, and it's hard to find where it is usually. That's why I like to get an item number, plug it in up here, and then it'll shoot you right to it. But usually, let's see, what one was it? I think it was here. Yeah, and so they're usually kind of grouped all together. So you have Red Rocket. There's 2 of them for the Red Rocket, actually, and then you have a bunch of different sanctuaries and things. So, and this also has a temporary folder. So you can click on the Red Rocket. There's some things you can adjust over here. It shows you regions and things that are associated with it. But the temporary folder here is where it will store all of those things, like brambles and just all the stuff, the dirt piles, I mean everything. And then you have these lights, which aren't actual bulbs or fixtures. These are the light spots that are being given off by specific lights. So when you want to change, when you click on this, basically this isn't the actual light. It kind of uses the default light worm 0NS non-spec as kind of like a model, and then it uses that, and it has different specs and different places as it uses the same light over and over. And that's why if you go in all the way up here, see, where was it, under light, my first way I would go in and I would literally try to find the light in here, and if you change the light in there, it'll change every light for the whole game, and so it's not really desirable to do that. You want to have individual, be able to tweak them individually here. So you got a radius, and if you lower this, if you lower it too much, it'll just go away altogether. And of course, if you increase it, it makes it expands it outward. You've got fade, which you can use to lower it and brighten it. Now, if you lower this too far, it doesn't make it disappear. It actually turns it into a shadow, and then it makes it really dark looking shadow if you make it too bright. But then it has linked references. This is interesting too here. I don't have anything set for this right now, but the linked references is neat. I've figured out how to do the light box with that. I don't know what else to do with this, but you can create light boxes and put them in the permanent folder. Actually, when you're dealing with the outdoor area, you only have temporary under this little subcategory. But if you scroll all the way up, the entire Commonwealth has one cell to it. And this is where it has the permanent. I meant to say persistent. This is where it has the persistent. And this is where all the light boxes are saved at. I shouldn't have clicked there. Okay. The reason why I didn't want to click there is because it takes about 5 minutes to expand this tree. There's a lot of stuff in here. And it's not necessary for me to do that, but you can see there's a lot of stuff in here. But the main things that I was messing with in here are the light boxes. So you can figure out which light boxes are already in the game, or you can just make your own. I usually just make my own, actually. It's pretty easy to do, but I'll explain a little more about it here. So there. Okay, I'm just going to show you here and under my mod. That way there's not so many things in there. So here I have a copy of the world space cell, and I have my own light boxes in here. So basically you can you set how big it is, and it's a box, and you can tell it to be other things, but I've tried them and it doesn't work. It seems like it only does box, so I just leave it at box. I modeled this after the other light boxes, so I just kind of looked at what they did and I thought, okay, well, I'll use these same values. But basically this is the size of your light box, and then down here you position it in the world. And the rotation is actually important too. Say the red rocket, for instance, it sits on an exact 45 degrees of the map, so if you want your light box to be perfectly square with the red rocket, then you have to put it at 45 here, so then you can adjust it and stuff. But the function of these light boxes is to prevent light from going through. So if you assign a light to a light box, it's just not allowed to shine outside of it. And if you move the light box kind of far away from where the light is, you'll only see a little bit of where the light would have been in that area, and then you won't see it anywhere else. So you can use these light boxes to manipulate your lights to kind of get them to, because the way the game is, I mean, the light will just go right through walls. So and most of the time they just do things to kind of mask that, and with the nighttime being so bright anyway, you don't notice it really very much. But when you darken the night to the levels that I've done, you'll start seeing that a lot everywhere. And so you have to, you can use this to fix it. It's not a perfect method, but it definitely does help, and it works really good in certain situations. You can also use other lights to mask it. Like, lights will not stack on top of one another. So if you have like 10 lights shining in the same spot, it doesn't make it brighter there. You'll just see one light really. But you can kind of use that actually to your advantage. Like if you have a little bit of light bleeding through a wall, you can add a light on the outside of the wall to cover it up, kind of, so that, you know. And they actually do that in the game a lot. So when you're checking out your lights and you're looking at them and you're adjusting them, you're very limited with what you can do on these individual lights and stuff. But at least you don't change every light for, like, if you change it here, at least you're not changing every default light fire NS in the game. You know, it's just only this one that was placed in that little area. So, and you can set how high it is and everywhere it's at. If you control click on it, you can jump to the light itself. But you'll notice the actual light itself has a lot more things that you can adjust into it. Here's one that I actually added in. I try not to add these in to my mod too much, but this is one particular one I think is associated with an item, and I really couldn't figure out any other way to manipulate that light other than to change the actual main light to the whole game. So there are different things you can do here. You have fade and radius and your color, and also you can adjust flicker, which is pretty neat. But these flags here, and a lot of them are unknowns. I tried hard to figure out what they do, but it's tricky. I don't really understand a lot of what some of these do, to be honest. But I did notice that if it's set to unknown 15, it will be confined to light boxes, and you will be able to use it for light boxes. But if it has unknown 14 on it, for some reason it will not follow a light box rule. It'll just bleed right out through anyway. But it has its own. It's tougher. It like changes the light. It makes it more of a downward cone shaped, and so it doesn't tend to bleed through walls anyway when it's that way. So it really depends on what kind of light that you're looking for, and you can change your light specs around. What I usually do is I just try to find a light that's already in the game, and I just use that and manipulate it a little bit from there. Like I said, I try not to ever change these. This is the only one I've added because it was associated to an item, and I couldn't figure any other way out to add it. Other than that, you should add them into the cells. So if you'd like to create your own light, and I've found sometimes by adding in or by trying to put a new record into your plugin, that if it glitches, like say if it's an object you want it to change and you add it in and it for some reason causes problems, one thing that I've noticed you can do is just add another object in over top of it or whatever, and it can hide it, but it only works in certain situations. But there's been situations where I've wanted to add in bulbs, like there's a light being produced by an empty fixture, and it's like, why doesn't that have bulbs? I want to put bulbs in there. So if you want to add in a light or add in anything really, basically what you do is you go to the area where you want to add it in at, like let's say a red rocket. I'll go here and just do a right click on there, and then you go to add, and you tell it to add a placed object, and then just think of a new number for it. And then you can do the slow double click like I told you about before, and it takes a little bit to load the list. Just be patient. Do a slow double click and then just wait. And then finally your list will come up. And then you can figure out, there's a lengthy list of just about any item you'd like to add. So that's how you would do that. And then you can just pick which lights you want. It doesn't necessarily have to be a light. Like these are all kinds of different things that you can add. So it's kind of neat. I mean, if you really wanted to spend the time, I suppose you could really like kind of build your own area. But you'd have to sift through and find your light or whatever, but I'm just going to pick something for the heck of it. And then you can add in emittance. So emittance is kind of neat because, well, let's see. Oh, it's a big list. It's a big list, but you can do things like these FXs here are interesting because you can actually tell it, like if you say let's see, FX region day night, FX region invert day night, like if you put that on its emittance, it'll make it so the light turns off during the day and comes on during the night. So it's pretty cool, and you can set your positioning and all that. So that's how you create new records, which I haven't really done a whole lot of. I only just do it when I'm irked because there's a light source with no light. I'll either take the light source out, or if I really like the light source, I'll put some kind of light there to justify it. A couple other things that I forgot to add in. If this was a light, of course it isn't, but I didn't feel like finding one on that huge list. But if you're trying to add a light, there are some other things that you need to add a radius to it, and also light data. You don't have to have the emittance if you didn't want that, but it does need these two things. And well, if it didn't have the radius, I guess it's going to just model it after if you don't put this stuff in, it's just going to model it after the main light. But these two things are the main things you're going to need to change it, your individual light for that specific location, and then of course your location down here. All this other stuff, I'm sure there's things you can do, but some of it doesn't always work. I mean, there's all these stats here, but this could be any item and not necessarily a light. So a light, you can only do so much to it, so not all of this stuff is going to work. But the light data and the radius are the two main things that I wanted to show you. So that's pretty much what I've learned so far. I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting, and there's also things I'm learning every day, so I'm constantly learning new stuff. But for now, this is probably quite a lot you can do with all of this, and I hope this helps. And now you can tweak it a little bit. If there's certain things you don't like, you can go and tweak your mods and stuff. And so that's mainly my whole goal, is to just help everyone learn. And I'm hoping, at the same time, I'm hoping that people will help me learn too. And it's just really fun, actually. And so yeah, so that's the end of my video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.